late 1950s, America loved big, powerful cars. Chevrolet was already one of the most trusted brands, but they wanted to try something different. Instead of another heavy gas guzzler, they wanted a compact car that could compete with the small European imports coming into the US. This new car would be stylish, affordable, and efficient. They called it the Chevy Corvair. When it was released in 1960, the Corvair seemed like a dream. Its sleek design stood out from the boxy cars of the time. It was rear-engined like the Volkswagen Beetle, which gave it a modern feel. It was cheaper than most family sedans, easy to park, and promised great fuel economy. On paper, it looked like Chevrolet had created the future of American driving. At first, people were excited. Sales reached nearly 250,000 cars in its first year. Magazines praised its innovation. Chevrolet advertised it as safe, stylish, and economical, the perfect car for the modern family. But beneath the shine, there was a dark secret. The Corvair had a fatal flaw in its design, one that would turn this car of the future into one of the most controversial vehicles ever made. The problem was its suspension system. Because the engine was in the back, the Corvair used what was called a swing-axle suspension. This meant that when the car made a sharp turn, the wheels could suddenly tuck under, causing the car to lose balance. Drivers often described the feeling as if the car wanted to roll over. In real-world driving, this design flaw made the Corvair unstable, especially at high speeds or during emergency maneuvers. The issue didn't take long to show itself. Drivers reported accidents, sometimes deadly, where the Corvair flipped over after what should have been a normal turn. Families who had bought the car with trust in Chevrolet were now dealing with broken bones, wrecked cars, and even the loss of loved ones. Chevrolet was aware of the problem, but fixing it properly would cost money. Instead of redesigning the suspension, they quietly recommended that dealers tell owners to keep the tires overinflated to reduce the risk. But few customers understood just how dangerous the design really was. Still, the Corvair kept selling. By 1962, hundreds of thousands were on the road, but whispers about its safety grew louder. Newspapers began to report on strange crashes. Mechanics warned customers about handling issues. Some owners even got rid of their cars after frightening close calls. And then came the turning point. In 1965, a young lawyer named Ralph Nader published a book that would shake the entire auto industry. Its title was Unsafe at Any Speed. In its first chapter, Nader focused on one car above all others, the Chevy Corvair. Nader exposed the flaws that Chevrolet had ignored, showing how the company put profits ahead of safety. He described in detail how the suspension made the car unpredictable and deadly. The book shocked the nation. Suddenly, the Corvair wasn't just a car, it was a scandal. People who once thought they owned a stylish, innovative machine now feared they were driving a death trap. The government could no longer look away. For the first time in American history, the safety of cars became a national conversation. The Chevy Corvair was no longer just a product. It had become the symbol of a much bigger question. Do car companies value lives, or do they value profits more? The year was 1965, and Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed was spreading like wildfire. For years, car accidents had been blamed mostly on drivers. If a crash happened, people assumed it was because the driver was careless or reckless. But Nader challenged that belief. He argued that many cars, especially the Chevy Corvair, were designed in ways that made accidents almost certain. The Corvair became the face of this problem. Its swing-axle suspension made the car unstable, and thousands of drivers had already reported terrifying spins, skids, and rollovers. In his book, Nader described the Corvair as one of the most dangerous cars ever sold to American families. His words struck a nerve with the public. People who had once admired Chevrolet began to feel betrayed. Families who lost loved ones in Corvair crashes found their grief echoed in Nader's warnings. Newspapers and television shows picked up the story, and soon the scandal wasn't just about one car. It was about whether the auto industry as a whole cared about safety at all. Chevrolet, instead of owning up to the problem, went on the attack. They hired private investigators to dig into Ralph Nader's personal life, hoping to discredit him. They followed him, tapped his phone, and even tried to catch him in embarrassing situations. But this plan backfired. When the harassment was exposed, the public saw Nader not as a troublemaker, but as a hero standing up against a powerful corporation. The US government could no longer ignore the growing anger. For the first time, Congress held hearings about car safety. Ralph Nader testified, and his calm, detailed explanations revealed how car companies had ignored basic safety measures to cut costs and boost profits. He explained that seat belts, stronger frames, and better suspension systems could save thousands of lives, but the industry had resisted because it was cheaper not to make those changes. The Corvair was the star witness. Stories poured in from drivers who described horrifying accidents. Experts demonstrated how the suspension made the car unstable in sharp turns. Some tests even showed that at certain speeds, the Corvair could lose control with little warning. The car that once symbolized innovation was now a symbol of corporate greed. Chevrolet scrambled to respond. In 1965, they quietly redesigned the Corvair with a new suspension system, one that fixed many of the flaws Nader had exposed. But it was too late. The damage to the Corvair's reputation was permanent. Sales collapsed, and the car that had once sold nearly 250,000 units in its first year was now fading fast from dealerships. But the story didn't end there. The scandal pushed the U.S. government to take unprecedented action. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson signed the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act into law. For the first time, car companies were required to follow federal safety standards. Seatbelts became mandatory equipment. Crash testing was introduced. The era of cars being sold with little regard for safety was over. And all of this had been sparked by one car, the Chevy Corvair. Chevrolet, once America's most trusted carmaker, had been humiliated. The Corvair became a cautionary tale, a reminder that ignoring safety could destroy even the biggest brand's reputation. Yet, strangely enough, the scandal didn't kill General Motors. Instead, it created a movement that forced the entire industry to change. Still, for Chevrolet, the Corvair was a wound that never healed. Its name became a punchline, a symbol of failure. But was the car truly as dangerous as Nader claimed, or was it simply the victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? That question would fuel debate for decades to come. By the late 1960s, the Chevy Corvair was no longer a symbol of innovation. It had become a reminder of controversy, lawsuits, and mistrust. Sales had plummeted year after year. Families who once dreamed of owning the stylish compact now avoided it. Dealerships were stuck with unsold stock, and Chevrolet shifted its focus to newer models like the Camaro and Chevelle, which quickly overshadowed the Corvair. In 1969, Chevrolet finally stopped making the Corvair. The car that began as a bold step into the future ended in quiet embarrassment. It had lasted less than a decade, yet its impact was enormous. The Corvair wasn't just a failed car, it had sparked a movement that reshaped the entire American auto industry. But the story didn't end there. In 1972, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration released a detailed report after years of investigation. Surprisingly, it concluded that the Corvair was no more dangerous than other cars of its era. By then, however, the damage was irreversible. Public opinion had already been sealed by years of negative press, personal tragedies, and Ralph Nader's powerful words. The truth no longer mattered, reputation did. For General Motors, the scandal became a painful lesson. The company had spent millions trying to fight Ralph Nader instead of fixing the car's problems early. Their decision to attack a critic rather than listen to him only deepened the scandal. To many Americans, GM looked less like a trusted company and more like a corporation willing to gamble with lives. The Corvair's downfall, however, gave rise to something bigger than one car. Thanks to the scandal, safety became part of every conversation about cars. Features like seatbelts, headrests, airbags, and stronger crash protection became standard, not optional luxuries. Ralph Nader's crusade, fueled by the Corvair, made cars safer for generations of drivers. Ironically, the Corvair itself has since gained a kind of cult following. Car collectors now treasure well-preserved models, not because of their performance, but because of their history. Owning a Corvair is like holding a piece of automotive controversy, a reminder of the car that changed how America thought about safety. In the end, the Chevy Corvair was both a failure and a success. It failed as a product but succeeded in forcing a conversation that was long overdue. It showed that cars were not just machines, they were lifelines, and how they were built could decide whether families lived or died. The scandal left Chevrolet with a scar, but it also left America with stronger protections. It reminded everyone that innovation without responsibility is dangerous. The Corvair story continues to echo because it asks a question that still matters today. How much is a human life worth to a corporation? The answer, written in the twisted wrecks of Corvairs and the laws that followed, is clear. The Chevy Corvair may have disappeared from showrooms, but its shadow still shapes every car on the road today.